Today we hear from George Scott Welsh, a CEO at Incuhive, a co-working and collaborative office space business that operates in several locations across the South Coast. Apart from the great work that Incuhive does, I was really keen to get George on the show to discuss his interesting career history and hear his unique perspectives on work and life. Our conversation takes in a range of topics, including the influence that he has had from coming from a very hardworking and entrepreneurial family, his varied career choices, other business investments that he's made, and the important lessons he's learned from them all, together with his attitude to money and the one thing that drives his passion for the businesses that he invests in. I've loved finding about different ways people approach life and business, and it's one of the things I enjoy most about the conversations I have on this podcast. And George is certainly someone with a fantastic outlook on a lot of subjects. I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome, George, to the Evolve to Succeed podcast.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, great, thank you. We've met a number of years ago, and I've always thought I wanted to have you on the podcast. So it's great to have you at Evolve today for us to have this conversation. And I suppose we should set some context for our listeners, a little bit about your background, and we'll talk about some of the businesses, very diverse businesses that you've run and operated and founded. But, you know, you come from a very entrepreneurial family, George. So tell us a little bit about that and the influence it's had upon you.
Yeah, so thank you. I'm very pleased to be back. I love hanging out and chewing the fat with you, so I'm very pleased to be here. So I come from a very normal family, not far from here. My mum didn't work. My dad was an entrepreneur of sorts. So he started in shipbroking in London, left London in the late 70s, moved to this part of the world, not far from here, and found an opportunity with a brewing startup, got involved in that, and he 30 years later sold Ringwood Brewery, and did pretty well. So he's a very interesting man. Yeah, he's just one of my inspirations in life, and in fact my journey's been very similar to his. Okay. Not very good in academia. Okay. I'm not sure, but I have a feeling he might have been chucked out of university, but you'll have to ask him that.
And were you?
I didn't graduate.
Okay.
We can talk about that in a second. Neither of us are particularly good at structured learning, although we both have a thirst for knowledge. Yeah. Dad, he's workaholic and very, very driven, very self-motivated. I would say that there's few people I meet that extract more out of a day than my parents. Still today.
Still to this day, even though they sold the brewery, moved on.
Yeah, so Dad's kind of semi-retired at 60. A year later, I was back helping other people found breweries, and he's a real grafter. Brilliant. So I've always been around a very hard-working environment. Yeah. My mum's exactly the same. She never stops, and we love work. So me and my brother and sister are all
now cut from the same cloth.
Yeah. So my brother's entrepreneurial. He's in brewing. He has his own brewery in Spain. Okay. I'm in Barcelona. My sister's been involved in her own startup as a co-founder, and she's now involved running a kind of startup for a French firm that are launching in the UK. So all entrepreneurial. Although never really thought that we were entrepreneurial. So it never really.
Well, it's a strange term, isn't it? It's one of those terms that we could discuss and define, and is it, and there's a lot of people that run businesses, start businesses, that feel very negative about the term because of the way perhaps it's portrayed in the media.
Yeah. I never thought that I was creative enough to start a business, and actually I haven't really, and we can come on to that later. Now that I'm in the job I'm in now, I do feel a bit more entrepreneurial, and I recognize opportunity and entrepreneurial spirit in myself. But early on, it was alien to me. I thought I'd never be able to do that.
Okay.
And I was always in awe of people that did, especially my dad.
We all need those people around us, don't we, that influence us and inspire us. And
and I talk to my dad, I don't know, 5 times a week.
Okay.
And 4 or 5 times a week, and all we talk about is business and football. So
business, it's a great combination.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. We're pretty boring.
And I must touch on and go back and just say, so you say you didn't finish university. Obviously, academia wasn't for you.
Yeah, so I left school in '98. I just wasn't. I wasn't very suited to structured learning. I just drift off and go down a rabbit hole and just learn what I wanted to learn. So I left school in '98. When I left school, I did a scheme for Glaxo, who were Glaxo Wellcome at the time. So I left home just after I left school, trundled up to Hertfordshire, and I started a year working for Glaxo. It was a pilot scheme, like a year in industry scheme that you might do at university.
Yeah.
And I went into a research lab, and I was a lab technician working with a team of people on asthma drugs. So I think it was in the early 90s, CFCs were banned because the problems they caused with the ozone, and all the drug companies used CFCs for their propelled inhalants. And so the drug companies had to use a new product to propel these respiratory inhalants. So they used a chaotic starch, and I was involved in a team that and so chemistry I really love science, chemistry. So Glaxo had a relationship with Leeds University, and so I went and studied chemistry at Leeds, and just played a lot of sport, didn't do any work, and eventually gave up, but not for about maybe 4. I think I did 2 first years, 2 second years, and then I came home.
Gave it a go then.
Yeah, and then I tailed between my legs and told my parents.
Which is really interesting, because there was the next bit of your kind of career life is something I did want to touch upon. Is you then went and worked kind of in the estate letting agency, so completely away from science. But you spent, a good spell of time at Foxtons in the early 2000s, which was when it kind of had this kind of, very much this culture, this image of success, reward. It was driven by John Hunt, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Who, made the business extremely successful. What was that period like? And, we all hear the stories of what Foxtons was like. Is that so true? Yeah.
So I kind of came home from university with nothing, and a tail between my legs. My mum was very disappointed. My dad was kind of pretty ambivalent and said, just don't worry about it, get on with trying to find something to do. I went and worked in France for a little bit, picking grapes, just whilst I tried to work out what I was going to do. I then did a little bit in a few months in a stockbroking firm in the city, which I didn't really like or understand. It's really it was noise. Didn't make any sense to me. The lack of tangibility of the stock market just was too confusing for my meager intellect. So a friend of mine suggested I applied for Foxtons. I didn't really understand estate agency or what it was. Yeah. And I went up to London. I think I slept in my car for the first week or so outside the office because I didn't have anywhere to live. And then I got my first paycheck and I moved into Balham. Okay. And I started as an estate agent in Balham, which was very interesting. I don't care what people think of my profession or and in fact I find people saying, what do you do, kind of like, it's not a very interesting question for me, but the juxtaposition of being at Glaxo in a research lab making asthma drugs, helping people, moving to a very unpopular high octane agency in London, was quite interesting, and my friends would rinse me for selling my soul and going into agency. But actually, if I look and reflect at both those companies, the work I did at Foxtons was really valuable, and I loved it. It's probably the best job I've ever had.
Okay.
And as someone in their mid-40s, I now question the ethics of some of the big pharma companies. So who knows?
Who knows what's right and what's wrong?
All businesses have maybe some questionable practices and rogue employees, and Foxtons was certainly one of those. But I absolutely loved it. It suited my desire to work relentlessly.
Probably did reward that work ethic that you'd grown
Absolutely.
up with.
There's a complete meritocracy. Everyone in at the bottom, every single person. So everyone in it starting at, I think you started on 22 grand, but you could go on to commission within the first few months. Everyone was on 10,000 quid a year. And then you're on so 833 quid a month, and then you got various degrees of commission. I absolutely loved it. I rose quite quickly, so I then became an assistant manager moved from the Balham office, assistant manager in the Chelsea office, and then I got my own office in Richmond in 2005. So I was 25.
Okay.
I had 16 employees.
Yeah.
I think we did about 4 million a year.
Wow.
At 47% EBIT, although you don't get that information because you're just part of a machine.
Yeah.
So you have to, I only found that out when I left in my exit interview. Actually, I asked
what was this? Yeah.
What kind of profit were we making out of that office? And it was an amazing company, an amazing culture.
And what have you taken from that Foxtons experience? Because I know others that have worked there and they've been very successful in business because they've taken aspects of that culture, that environment, and maybe without some of the toxic elements, and kind of created businesses in a similar way and mold. I mean, what have you taken from that experience?
The most successful people in Foxtons were the managers that could extract the best out of their teams. And they didn't do that. Some of them did it through fear, some did it through remuneration. But the absolute best managers, like my first manager, who's now very high up in Knight Frank, he's the godfather of one of my children, and he was an inspiration to me, and he managed me using motivating me and inspiring me. So I feel the key strength I have now in running business is people, understanding people, managing people, being flexible, getting the best out of them. I'm not very good at kind of recruitment because Foxtons did all the although it was part of some of the recruitment processes there when I became a manager. Mostly I was just
a process.
I was just process, and it was all done, and I was sent people. And I suppose nothing beats hard work. And the hours were pretty strong. So 8 till 8, 5 days a week, 9 to 5 on a Saturday. And it was just relentless. But in your mid-20s, and they paid really well. So we earned really good money. We were also in the property market where, the market was rampant. So we all bought flats with the money that we earned. So you could
all created wealth.
Yeah, you could get 105% mortgage in 2005. So you just had some decent paychecks in a row. And get mortgages on flats, and so we bought. Me and a lot of my contemporaries bought lots of flats. And in fact, those properties have then funded
other things you've then gone
all of my failures in startup. Basically, I have to sell one every few years. I sold one last year, sold one in COVID. So but that's just the way it goes.
What made you move out of that world?
I very much worked for John.
And
I really he is an incredible individual who I'm not sure if I aspire to be like, because he's quite intense and quite scary and works harder than anyone I've ever met, and I'm not sure that's healthy, but he sold the business to BC Partners in 2007, August, and I left a week later.
Okay.
I just felt the time was right.
Yeah.
I
Time to move on and
wasn't.
do
Yeah, I
something
wasn't
different.
that bothered with working. I love my. I come from a background of family business. I love the intimacy, the chain of command, the non-corporate.
And that's what Foxtons did create, wasn't it? It was a owner managed, but even when it scaled to the size it did, it did it, and it was still owner managed, wasn't it? And it was still led in an owner managed kind of way.
Yeah, I get a phone call from John's PA of an evening. George, John's meeting you tomorrow morning. Make sure in the office. So I'd get there at like 7. He'd got there at 5:30. And he would have driven round Richmond where I was working and noted down all of the competitor Knight Frank and Savills agency boards and kind of run them through our system, seen if I've been in the property.
Yeah.
And then he'd ask me why I didn't win that instruction. I'd be like, sorry.
Nothing like preparation.
Yeah. But he would send me a £5 at Christmas or for my birthday present in a card.
Brilliant.
So, it was an amazing time, but it's time to move on. I then... So I spent 3 months thinking about starting my own business in 2007, and I didn't really have any ideas, and I was talking to my dad and I couldn't come up with anything. I read a very interesting book, which has got a slightly grotesque title, which is How to Become Rich by Felix Dennis.
Okay.
It's very funny. Dennis Publications, so Maxim, and he talks about getting out of a corporate environment and starting yourself. And exactly what I felt like I was reading the book, reading something that was written for me. Exactly what he said would happen happened. And my old area director from Foxtons, who'd moved to Chesterton, called me. I've got a job in Mayfair. Do you want it? And I was like, yeah. And so I went back in and I did 3 years at Chesterton until Kiss Gyms.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we should then talk about that journey, that, founding, co-founding businesses, investing in businesses. And what intrigues me every time I speak to you, George, is the diversity. So, pubs, hospitality, restaurants, gyms, co-working spaces, consultancy businesses. There's just such a diversity of businesses. And we'll probably touch on some of them and go into more depth on some of them. But why such diversity?
It's probably because I have no discernible talent or skill other than being able to manage people.
Okay.
So any business that has people in it,
but it's a people-driven business.
I'm interested in, and the product is largely irrelevant. I don't feel passion about any of the products of any of the businesses that I've ever been involved in. Okay. But I'm passionate about the people within that business and also the customers of those businesses. Okay. So I left, and going back to my kind of earlier stage where I felt I found it very difficult to create businesses. And I think my dad was the same. So when the Ringwood opportunity came up, it had been founded only about 2 months before, and he joined as number one, but I think as an investor as well, and then got involved. And I was exactly the same with Kiss Gyms. Okay. So a friend of a friend introduced me to a chap with a business plan, and it was the Pure Gym Group kind of low-cost business plan of the late noughties, and we kind of got together. I put a bit of money in from the money I'd earned from London, and off we went. And
you said earlier you don't really see yourself as an entrepreneur. Do you see yourself more as a business angel?
No,
investor. Then.
I'm terrible at business. I don't advise anyone in angel investing. It's it's like the casino.
Have you tried that though?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So generally though, you'll invest in something you're going to participate
in
and put your heart and soul in and put 100%. That work ethic behind as well.
Yeah, 100%. I've done a few investments into some startups, none of which have been successful. Right. So
is that about picking the right and wrong thing?
I'm an eternal optimist.
Are you a heart and soul kind of guy?
Yes, and I think everything's going to be successful. Okay. And I think everyone that I meet, when they tell me something's going to be brilliant, that it's going to be as good as maybe I think I could do, and
Yeah.
it never is.
Right.
Which is also why I'm not very good at recruiting people.
Right.
I'm very, very good at offloading if
Yeah.
I've made a mistake, and I've done that
Okay.
many times, but I'm not a very good recruiter,
Right.
because someone tells me they can do something and I assume it's
You're just the trusting individual.
that. I think a lot of salespeople are trusting.
Yeah.
They're very easy to sell to. But I think they can do it at the same level as maybe I can. And I always just like to see the best in people.
Yeah.
And so I employ them and they turn out to be wrong. And so then,
Yeah.
but I'm from my Foxtons experience, which is a brutal environment for underperformers, where I can't remember how many people I offloaded at Foxtons.
Yeah, but you can't have any compromise in terms of people, can you?
No.
That's one of the things that does drive success is, recruitment is difficult, managing people is difficult. But, one bad egg, the wrong vibes, the wrong attitudes, that can spread quite quickly. And therefore, if you do make a mistake, you do have to go with no compromise and do something about it. And a lot of businesses don't. And that does lead to trouble, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I'm very much of the belief that it is all my fault. So I've either recruited badly, or I've trained badly, or I've managed badly.
Yeah.
I don't ever see it being the fault of my employees. The structure is either wrong, the remuneration is wrong, or they're in the wrong job. So the job description is wrong, or I've just recruited the wrong person. And I take that quite seriously, the way I approach that.
Yeah.
And I've found that's been kind of very useful for me.
I'm just intrigued because we talked a lot earlier about work ethic and that constantly being switched on. And perhaps we'll come talk about the consequences on you personally of having that kind of approach as we progress the conversation. But right now, we're talking about team members and employees. How do you manage your expectations that, perhaps that employee won't have the same graft and work ethic as you?
So I don't have the same expectations of my employees, and I've always been. I think one of the keys to good management is to empower your employees. Remember how much you pay them, and remember their value to how much you pay them effectively. I always recall having a tete-a-tete with my old man in the pub business that I have, where he came down to help out and got very frustrated with one of my waiting staff. I was like, Dad, we pay her £4.50 an hour. Yeah. What are you talking about? Relax. You can't have the expectation that they are the same as us or a higher paid person. And I'm always super
You're a realist in that way.
Absolutely. And I try to understand everything about my employee. Yeah. So whether it's their family life, their home life, their what's going on with their children, so that I've got a really rounded view, because all employees fluctuate, as do managers and owners, and it's our goal as good managers to keep them very level. Yeah. And you don't actually want them to peak and trough, although salespeople do tend to peak and trough a lot naturally. You want to keep them on a level, and you can't do that if your expectations are in the wrong place.
No, definitely not. And you've talked about the investments, not all of them coming off and other things. But when you look back at the last, I suppose, 15 years since you really went out and started businesses and worked in a number of these businesses, what's your biggest success today?
I mean, I don't feel that I've had a success. Okay. My benchmark's quite high, because I benchmarked my dad. Okay. And he had a very successful business, which he, did well in. The early days of the gym was very successful. And that was an amazing ride. I think our Milton Keynes gym, in the first week, we had 1,076 sign-ups in one day for a gym.
Wow.
Yeah, which is incredible. So
yeah, it's a high day.
Yeah, I think a lot of success is about timing.
Yeah.
So with the gyms, we probably stayed in too long.
Okay.
And we could have exited a bit earlier.
Yeah.
our investors exited in 2014, and my business partner and I bought our investors out.
Right.
So it might have been, but hindsight's a very great thing. So COVID has damaged that business.
And do you think you're always chasing the Holy Grail? Is that kind of bar that is set a Holy Grail?
Certainly when I was younger, in my early 30s. However, now that's definitely not the case.
Okay.
And I think COVID,
reset for us all.
Yeah, reset that for me and made me adjust. It's the journey for me. I'm not massively money motivated.
Okay.
And I'm not materialistic. I drive a van.
Yeah.
I don't have any nice stuff. I'm wearing crappy trainers and Primark trousers, and I don't have anything expensive.
With a smile on your face.
Yeah, I don't go to expensive restaurants.
Yeah.
So I don't really have any expensive habits.
Yeah.
So for me, it's I like winning.
Yeah.
And I like profit, because profit's winning.
Yeah. It's a metric to winning, isn't it?
Yeah, in business.
And it gives you choice in business, doesn't it?
So yeah, but I make it up as I go along, basically, and just enjoy. I enjoy the interactions that running your own business creates for me. Right. People, interacting with people.
It's all about people.
Yeah, everything's about people. Yeah. I'm really fascinated by humans.
Yeah,
I think they're extraordinary.
And you've never been tempted to invest, be part of a product business? It's always been services in one way, shape, or form.
I've invested in a few product businesses.
Yeah.
And they haven't been that successful. I have a product business.
Okay.
That I've just bought the URL for.
Okay.
So I might do that.
Watch this space.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit of a gimmicky business, but you never know.
And do you why have you got interest in so many different businesses? And do you have to have that diversity to have the intellectual stimulus and challenge?
I think it's the optimist
in
me thinking, I have an idea that will work.
Yeah.
I'll go and do that.
Right.
And I like following through on things that I think
ideas.
Yeah. To see. But I'm also long term.
Yeah.
So I've been at Incuhive for 6 years.
Yeah.
I was in the gym for 11 years.
Yeah.
I was in agency for 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm not short term at all.
No.
I'm not, I'm
It's a good point.
I'm
when I
really
look at your business and the diversity, it's not in and out.
No, I'm really persistent. That's possibly one of my issues to success, is that my timing is, maybe if I had a more short-term view, it would probably affect the outcomes more positively.
Yeah.
But that's just not how I am.
That's not how you're wired.
I'm very persistent.
Yeah.
And I don't quit. I keep going. And I think, was it Elon Musk said one of the biggest errors in business is wishful thinking. I'm kind of one of them, but I'm getting better. Getting better. So exiting the gyms in 2020, unbelievably painful.
Yeah.
But that was a very pragmatic approach to a change in the market.
Yeah.
A change in both the gym market and the operational market, and exiting was the right decision at that time.
Yeah.
Or however painful.
Yeah, definitely.
So I am learning.
And are you a business learning? Are you a business that therefore goes into business not with a definition of a plan and what good looks like? It's about creating the business and driving the business and seeing where you can take it.
Yeah, I don't have exit strategies.
No.
It's a long-term view. I have to enjoy my job.
Yeah.
If I don't enjoy my job, I'm off.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I also, I suppose I escape a bit through work.
Okay.
So I love working.
Yeah.
It's my escapism. And so I'm definitely guilty of working in my business than on my business.
Yeah.
And I actually find working in my business more enjoyable for me.
Yeah.
And working on my business.
Where you belong.
it's where I belong. I'm on the shop floor. That's, I love that.
And a lot of your businesses, from what I understand, you have co-founded with others, or there's significant others in.
Always.
And is that because you realise where your skill set is? Is that because how opportunities have come to you? Why?
I'm very amenable.
Yeah.
And so I work well with others.
Yeah.
I seek praise.
Okay.
So working with others gives me that.
Yeah. Whereas if you're on your own,
I feel lonely and isolated. I'm more motivated in a partnership than I am on my own. I don't like the very early stage of a business. So the conception. And so that's the business planning, being really thorough. I like the doing.
Yeah.
And so it's always kind of been that way. The business I've most recently got involved in, which is called Z Alpha. I've got a co-founder.
Yeah.
And we talk every day, and it works for me. Yeah. I like vocalizing.
You've got somebody that's there doing the process, driving the activity, and then you can put your energy into people driving and sales. And
I'm not very thorough on my own when I'm talking through something to myself.
Okay.
Because I'll just drift off and start thinking about something else. Whereas with a partner, I really thrive off there.
Because you want the relationships, you have the dialogue and that respect you need.
And as I articulate how I feel it should be, or my thoughts, it then stimulates further ideas and strategy in my head, which I can,
So this is a really interesting conversation, because you're somebody that knows yourself really well. Is that how I would say it? You know who you are, what you are, what drives you, what doesn't motivate you, what you want out of life. Not a lot of people find that.
No.
Where
does it come from?
Where does it come from? And any hints and tips on somebody trying to find themselves in that way? Because I think you talk about happiness a little bit, and having a smile on your face. Well, you can only be happy if you've got to that point to a large degree.
Yeah. So in 2011, I bought a pub, kind of B&B down in Devon.
Yeah.
With an idea to kind of go into that industry and build a pub co. And I moved down to Devon and I worked in my pub.
Yeah.
And I basically became a massive pisshead.
Okay.
And I wasn't boozing daily, but once or twice a fortnight, and I'd get wrecked. And I stopped drinking in 2017.
Okay.
In July.
And haven't drunk since?
So I did 4.5 years completely dry, nothing, not a drop. Right. I still don't drink, but I've had a few in the last kind of 2 years, maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah.
But other than that, I would class myself as teetotal. And through that process, I introspected and kind of, I looked at, did some personal development.
Yeah.
I did one of your Evolve courses in Southampton, which I really enjoyed. I've still got the booklet.
Brilliant.
And I didn't, it wasn't a conscious process.
Yeah.
I had a lot more time because I wasn't thinking about how hungover I was or where the car was or did I say something silly last night at a party, etc. I had a lot more time to think because it wasn't consumed by either anxiety or guilt from getting on the piss, so
getting wrecked,
so and I just started thinking about what I'm good at, what I'm bad at, what I like about myself, what I don't like about myself, and trying to make changes, I suppose.
Wow.
But it's just a natural process. It wasn't specific.
It wasn't a journey that you specifically went on. It was just part of this overall kind of life's kind of rich tapestry.
Yeah, and I used to see courses like or days like your days and groan because it filled me with dread.
Yeah.
And I'd talk to my business partner Steve, and he'd be like, "Why are you going to that?" And I was like, "I don't know. I've been invited. I'm going to go. It's a good opportunity. And then I'd leave absolutely buzzing.
Yeah, fired up.
Yeah, and really
First time we met, I remember that was at the
I'm
Harbour
really
Hotel
infused.
in Southampton. Yeah.
I still slightly cringe at the thought of personal development.
Yeah.
Maybe because I'm English, I don't know. But we're not very good at it. But I don't focus on it.
Yeah.
I just naturally think about it, I suppose.
And I'm also interested, and maybe that this is your mindset, is most of the businesses you've gone into them at a time when they've been new to the UK, or there's been a significant shift and change in the market, like the gyms, probably one of the very first low cost providers.
I think we were third.
We talk about, Incuhive, and that's a co-working space and kind of business incubator when they weren't really about in the UK. So is that the ideas that stimulate you, or just, why are you doing businesses in that kind of way that are perhaps new to market and have the challenges of that in themselves?
I think it's a really good question.
Yeah.
I think it's probably the error of my ways. Okay. If I started an electrician's business, I was talking to my team about this morning. We're trying to get some Sparky quotes for our site in Weybridge, and it's just been a bit of a slow, protracted process. We had one through today, so thank you to that Sparky. But if I did an existing model and just did it better, I would have been far more successful. Yeah. I suppose I don't know. Yeah, I can't articulate why. I like exciting. I like fresh. I like new. Yeah. I always have. And
just what inspires us all, isn't it?
Yeah. I just gravitate towards that type of model, but it's definitely not specific. No. I'd actually avoid it. Yeah. Because first mover advantage doesn't exist. It's a disadvantage in business, in our opinion. Okay. Yeah. So,
and to touch on Incuhive, because that was a business you co-founded, invested in.
Not a co-founder.
Okay.
Employee number one.
Employee number one.
Yeah. Okay. So this was I left Devon in 2017.
Right.
So the non-drinking
sobered up.
Yeah, straight. The non-drinking coincided with me leaving that business. Yeah. You can't not booze in that environment. It's just too difficult. So I moved up to Winchester. I was invited through a friend of a friend to do some mentoring with Winchester University, and I met the founder of Incuhive, who's a guy called Steve Northam, and he founded the business quite a while before, maybe 3 years. Okay. So I think it was 2015, maybe 28, late 2014 he founded, opened in 2015. And I met him in 2017, I think. And then I bought into the business with no intention of working there, just as an investment. I liked the business. I liked him. I liked the model. And I had another job, like a job in a startup in London lined up. But I got itchy, kind of cold feet. Yeah. I pulled out of that and I phoned up Steve and said, can I come and make some tea? Yeah. And so I just started, and that was 2018. We had one site. Yeah. And then we drove that business to 11 sites.
11 sites?
Yeah, we peaked at 11, which was October, middle of last year. We've closed a couple for operational difficulties around energy pricing. So if we've got electric heaters in some of the sites, fixed pricing, then it just becomes untenable. Yeah. And we've got half a dozen in the pipeline. So again, I'm always correcting people. I'm not a co-founder of Incuhive. Yeah, okay. So it's again the same kind of thing. But Steve and I work really well. Yeah. He's very different to me and you should get him on here. He's a very interesting chap.
We will.
We're really close. We talk every day. He is a kind of startup junkie. Yeah. And is very, very strong at that early stage. Do everything yourself and get it to a particular point. Yeah. I think my strengths are, once it's started and has bones and a bit of structure, taking it then, because
driving that scale.
Yeah, because I'm very comfortable in the same position for a long time. Yeah. So actually, I bought Steve out a year ago in April. Bought controlling share, and I bought the whole of the business last month.
Okay, and it's an interesting space, isn't it? Obviously, we operate a very small 20-desk co-working space out of our Evolve premises. It is a very interesting space that's constantly evolving, isn't it? So
Incuhive was founded as an incubation business, solving the problem that Steve had. Steve is a lecturer at the Winchester University Business School, and his alumni, when graduating, had no support locally in Winchester for their student startups. So he created a space to help them flourish, to improve their chances of success. He invested in some of the businesses, not with money, but with time, effort, focus, and that's how the business was founded. I then joined when we had one site, and I have a property background, and we ramped up. Steve always wanted 10 sites, and we ramped up, and we kind of drifted away from incubation towards serviced office and co-working with business support. And that's where we are today. My vision for the future is to have a network of effectively serviced offices, business centers, very flexible terms, very supportive environment, business support if you want it. If you don't, that's absolutely fine. As long as you get involved in the community, then we're happy. So that's the next step for us.
That's the next stride.
Yeah, the market. So pre-COVID, we used a banking term, which was Incuhive shorts commuting. Commuting's bad for your wallet, your health, the environment. You never get a seat on the train, and founders and small business owners want to have their business as close to home as possible. And lots of, and COVID has expedited that position.
Definitely.
And so the market's really strong. There's a lot of issues with traditional office space, inefficient, badly run, some of it not fit for purpose. And so we want to create these highly efficient, flexible workspaces with community where there's an opportunity for business support if needed, across the South. And that's the target. That's
the journey.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, thanks.
As we sort of start to wrap up our conversation, I want to come back to that. We've talked a lot about business, haven't we? We've talked about family and business, but we talked about your work ethic and nearly always being on. And I would assume, because of that story with regard to the pub, nearly an addictive type personality. What impact has that had on you as a human being and from a personal perspective?
Since my first days at Foxtons in the early 2000s, I would always put work number one. Always. Family number two. Exercise number three, but down on the floor, and health non-existent. And it's taken me to my early 40s to try and adjust that. I would say that only in the last 18 months has work switched from being number one to number two. And now family's number one, but certainly exercise and health are number two and number three. I never turn off. I have an inability to turn off at all. And I find it very, very difficult to relax, which is why I like getting boozed so much. But I'm sure that will change one day. I'm sure it's had a detrimental effect on things in my life, but nothing negative enough to share, I don't think. Especially off the back of being able to give up the juice. I think if I continued on that path, then inevitably
you'd have been in a different place.
Much different place. I would have been divorced, definitely, and not seeing my kids and all that kind of stuff. So, but you make
realize that you make those choices.
These changes.
Definitely make changes as they're needed.
I don't see it as work. So I don't really call it work.
No.
I'm off to work. It's just, because it's so varied.
Yeah.
So there's
of the different interests, I suppose.
Yeah, and there's lots of different businesses, and there's lots of different other things that I'm involved in. Other charity stuff and various different bits and pieces. It's just a meeting.
That's how you're fulfilling your day.
Yeah. It's just being busy to stop my overactive mind sending me round the twist,
keeping you sane.
Yeah, basically. Otherwise, I'll start thinking about the universe and the enormity of our existence, and then that's like.
And we started before we put the cameras on having a conversation about AI, and I think
gosh,
let's not go there and not have those conversations because but yeah, I mean, it's just really interesting. I really enjoyed the conversation because I think you're different to most of the people that we've had on the podcast that perhaps have a focus on a single business. Or maybe they've exited that and they've started another. It's the diversity of the attention that you seem to be able to give things, realizing that they don't always succeed in work, but driving the ones that do. And I think that takes a unique personality.
Yeah, maybe it's kind of like ADHD or something. I'm sure someone these days
we'll listen to the podcast and diagnose you.
Yeah, we'll give it a label. I'm not a big fan of labels, so I would never know. But it could be to do with attention. Yeah. I have a very organized mind.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that until someone told me, who also had a very organized mind, and he was quite intrigued. And so I can compartmentalize things.
Yeah.
I'm not very organized.
Yeah.
Administratively, but my thoughts are.
Yeah.
And they're very clear.
And you're able to switch your mind from one thing to the other.
And I've got a very good memory.
Yeah.
Which helps.
Yeah.
But no, I don't know what the personality trait is, and it's not specific.
Yeah.
It's just how it is. It's similar to maybe my academic and sporting life. It's kind of, I'm never brilliant at anything, but kind of interested in
the variety of life.
Yeah, interested in lots of varied different things. Today I play football, cricket. So I'm in football. I play football on Thursday night, cricket on a Tuesday night, golf. So I play all these sports terribly, but I like being part of those groups and teams, and so
brilliant. And I always end with the same question, which is, what's your definition of personal success, George?
So my personal success criteria has nothing to do with business.
Okay.
And it's always been to do with procreation and family and passing on my genes. It's very evolutionary, Darwinism, whatever you want to call it.
I suppose that's that strong family background.
Yeah, and it's been like that since I was probably 17 or 18. I've always thought, and actually I now feel very comfortable with my mortality in that I've got children, and I feel much more relaxed about that. So my personal success criteria, I suppose I vicariously now live through my children. I'm not a competitive dad though, but personal success is different for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's why I always end with the question.
I think money is probably the last thing that you should think about when you're thinking about personal success. Yeah. I think relationships, friendships, solidity with
kind of the things you're going to be remembered for.
People. Yeah. Being fair to people, being open with people.
Brilliant.
I think it's probably the most important thing for personal success. But I don't know, keep learning.
Brilliant. Keep learning.
Yeah.
It's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you for your honesty in sharing your story and everything that you've told our listeners today. If people want to find out more about you and the businesses you're involved in, where's the best place to go, George?
Yeah, ping me on LinkedIn.
Find you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, George Scott Welsh.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you for being a great guest on the podcast.
Yes, thank you, Warren. And I look forward to hanging out soon.
Yeah, great. Thank you, George.
Cool.